What's up, guys? Back with chapter 1. So here we go. Love. What is it exactly? Despite the fact of it being a four-letter word, it's sadly misused on a daily basis by idiots all around the world. The word itself holds no value or of higher power and intimate meaning like it used to. I myself find it hard to believe such a faithful and jealous thing still exists. Love, in my opinion, holds a high standard. I want to fall in love the right way, even if off of a sudden look at first sight. I closed my eyes for a moment, creating my own mental image of how it should be. I smiled warmly to myself before I continued writing. I imagined that in that very moment, either meeting her or grasping a solid glance from afar, then my heart would skip a beat if it didn't stop completely. "Malice, get your ass out here now," my father yelled. "Coming," I groaned, slamming my journal shut. Was it normal for a 19-year-old guy to confess his feelings and thoughts in a notebook that he kept hidden, if he even expressed them at all? I'm sure Johnny and the guys would call me a faggot if they ever found out. I pulled up a loose piece of wood from the floor where I kept my journal, securing it safe and down inside. I was never good at keeping my father waiting, so I ran with haste each time I was summoned on his command. "Yes, sir." I stood nervously before the man I called my father, reeking of alcohol, as usual. He neared me, standing over me, with his 6-inch difference in height being apparent. I stood 5'11", not too short or excessively tall either. His glazed eyes from intoxication struggled to keep me in focus. "What in the fuck are you doing in there? You smoking weed again in my house?" "No, sir," I quickly answered. "Good. Better not be." "How was work down at the factory?" I relaxed my posture to a sudden change of subject. "You know how it is, Dad. How was you down at the office?" My father had been working for our local post office for the last 15 years. He used to not drink so heavily until my mother got into a severe car accident back when I was 13. She now suffers back and neck pain, battling pain medications amongst the disappointment of unemployment. We are up to our fucking eyeballs in medical bills. I work as much as possible to make ends meet around here, helping as much as I can. All in all, I knew my father felt like every ounce of weight sat on his shoulders alone, and it hurt me to see him so stressed out, even more so that he never seemed to recognize my eagerness to assist. Though my mom collects disability checks from the government, it still doesn't make up for what we owe in medical expenses. My $7.50 hourly wage sure as hell didn't put a dent in our bills that we had racked up. I alone tried to keep some extra money set aside for my own wants and needs. "Another fucking day, Mally," he sighed pessimistically. "I can tell," I mumbled under my breath. My father raised an eyebrow to my asinine remark. "You getting smart with me, boy?" "No, sir." I swallowed hard, watching him straighten his posture with dominance. I breathed in heavily as my father stood at a close proximity with my face. "You think that just because you're considered an adult now, that you have the entitlement to speak to me in such a manner?" His tone lowered. I clenched my jaw, trying not to smell the booze on his breath. "I was only agreeing that you appear to have had a stressful day," I bit out. My father touched his forehead to mine, grasping the tail end of my undone mohawk, causing me to wince from the pain. "Don't you ever think for one damn second that I won't put you in your place, son." He backed away, giving my cheek a stern double pat with the pads of his fingers, and then smiled sardonically. He sipped from the glass of amber whiskey, making his way back to the recliner. My mother sat in silence, as she always does, never daring to intervene. I didn't blame her, especially after my father had been pulling several bottles of alcohol to his lips. When I was a young boy, I remember my parents arguing frequently, mostly over money and such. I distinctively hold a fond memory of a night when I was about 9 years old. My father came home after being away at a local pub for a few hours just watching football. I was seated at the dining table just eating, minding my own business, watching cartoons, when the sound of glass shattering broke my attention. My mother jumped up to clean the mess from the kitchen floor, since my father ended up dropping his glass of whiskey, already being past the point of inebriation. My mother suggested that he had lied down to let the alcohol wear off, and he became ill-tempered. Ranting and raving, my mother quickly ushered me to my bedroom, asking that I had stayed put until told otherwise. I sat on the edge of my bed, knees tucked into my little chest, listening to them screaming back and forth, just slamming objects. I plugged my ears, wanting to scream and cry myself, praying for it to just stop. though I was too young to completely understand. I knew I was scared. The moment I heard a loud thud, I immediately jumped off my bed, running from my bedroom door. I cracked it slightly, giving enough room to just investigate on what exactly happened. My room is at the end of the house, giving a perfect outlet through the living room and into the kitchen. I saw my mother on the kitchen floor with my father's hands wrapped around her throat. My first instinct should have been to shut the door, but instead I let my gut carry me with running feet to my mother's rescue. I jumped on my father's back, screaming at him, begging for him to stop while I watched my mother's eyes fill with tears as she fought for air. I socked my father in the back of his head with all the strength a 9-year-old could contain. He shoved me off, throwing me right into the refrigerator. It was so hard that the force knocked down an old bottle of olive oil. The glass was so thick that it resisted its fall without breaking. I picked it up in a single instant, taking it straight to the back of my father's head. It broke open, splitting over his skull. Take note that at this point I used to play Little League Baseball, so it was a nice advantage to have. Once the blow was made, my father collapsed to the floor beside my mother. The last thing I remember was her pulling me tightly into her chest, bawling her eyes out, telling me how sorry she was, over and over again. I have yet to see my father lay another hand upon her to this day, in which I became the physical punching bag instead, which I didn't mind as long as he kept his aggression far from my mother, because I sure as hell would kill that son of a bitch and not think twice about it. I never understood why she wouldn't just up and leave him. She would always talk about taking me away to a nicer place where we would have a safe home in a big backyard in the suburbs, a nice place where I could continue my baseball career without the fear of my father. It was of course a rambling fairy tale, my mother's hopeless dreams, but I didn't mind hearing it. She always tried maintaining an optimistic attitude for my sake and that of her own sanity. It's crazy just how quickly dreams can be shattered. Above everything else you put forth, yet what you give up for the happiness and welfare of your loved ones. I guess the reality of never finding a permanent escape kept her around. My father was a psychopath maniac type who would hunt us down and kill us for committing such a deceiving and manipulative act. He started like that before. Seemingly so, the threat was empty. My mother still feared for the worst. I always wondered if we ever made that move, would she have been any better? Or would I be as fucked up as I was now? Once my father locked in his stare at the television, I took my cue to leave the room, making my way back to mine. Locking the door behind me, I shut off my light, crawling into bed. I grabbed my iPod from the nightstand, sliding on my headphones, staring up at a glow-in-the-dark poster of Tupac I had taped overhead. I was in no rush to fall asleep since I was off work tomorrow. I figured my plans for the day would consist of hanging out with my crew, Johnny, his younger brother Jacoby, Trenton, and Colton. Of course, we were never up to any good, but I loved them as if they were my own blood. We've been through hell and back together, bearing similarities when it came to our fucked-up home lives. Johnny and Jacoby have an abusive stepfather and a cocaine addict for a mother. Johnny is a year older than me, with Jacoby falling 2 years behind. Johnny has been to the juvenile detention center a few times for stealing and vandalizing public property. What an example to set for his younger brother. Even though vandalism is a felony, Johnny was actually quite good at his artwork. Trenton was a football star through high school, with his dream ending after a hard tackle so severe that it tore his ACL in his knee during our senior year homecoming game. He didn't let that break him, still coming off as a meathead, hitting the weights every chance that he could get. His parents pushed him to be an undefeated ball player instead of letting him live his life and be a kid. He had scouts from all over the country looking at him. I wasn't sure if he was more depressed over the fact that he lost the chance to play for the college team, or the fact that he could never play anymore. After losing his scholarship, his parents put a lot of blame on him, literally driving Trent to find peace within drug usage and alcohol abuse. He occasionally still hits the needle to beef up, mentally believing that he could conquer all of his fears just because he could probably kick anyone's ass. He definitely lets people know from a far standoff point to be wary and think twice before ever approaching him with some arrogant bullshit. Now Colton, on the other hand, is a more reserved and laid-back kind of guy like myself. He's typically the pothead skater who just enjoys chilling. He can adapt to about any change thrown his way, considering he had been a foster child his entire life. And the only fact that he carried about his biological parents is that his mother was a young teen pregnancy scenario and had a father who dipped out, leaving her with the problem. He turned all right in my opinion. We all generally just hang out and throw the bullshit, but like I said, we all have our personal home issues, but we never let them break us down or tear us apart. I honestly don't know what I would be doing, where the fuck I would be without those guys. Bad influence or not, those guys were my life. Alright guys, sorry if I stammered a little bit, you know, just trying to get the feel of how to do this, but any questions or answers about the characters and this, that, and the other, just feel free to go ahead and leave me some questions or comments, and I'll get back to you, okay? Thank you guys so much for listening.